Four 30,000-pound bunker-buster bombs were dropped into the rocky soil of Zanjan province. Designed to burrow deep and explode inside hardened caverns, they did what they were built to do only halfway. They buried themselves and, according to Iranian authorities, did not detonate. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said its forces located 3 of those GB-57 massive ordnance penetrators, destroyed them, and defused a 4th that was left behind. They also say they recovered 2 cruise missiles, including a weapon described as a GBU-39, and neutralized more than 9,500 smaller bomblets and dozens of rockets that their statement asserts did not function after being fired by enemy aircraft. Those battlefield claims are consequential not only for what they say about the fighting on the ground, but for what they reveal about a war that appears to be fought on 2 interconnected fronts: kinetic military action and high-stakes diplomacy. For every bomb trucked into a hillside, the fought air is a parallel effort at the negotiating table, and in recent days, that diplomatic track took an abrupt and confusing turn. A planned shuttle by 2 of the president's closest envoys, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, to Islamabad was canceled at the last moment. President Trump announced the decision bluntly, dismissing the trip as unnecessary and saying, "We have all the cards. We're not going to spend 15 hours in airplanes all the time going back and forth to be giving a document that was not good enough, so we'll deal by telephone and they can call us anytime they want." His remarks, given in a mixture of exasperation and strategic assurance, underscored a larger ambiguity. Washington was simultaneously signaling confidence in its leverage and signaling a withdrawal from face-to-face talks that had been intended to revive a fragile ceasefire. That cancellation came as Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi was moving through a fast-paced diplomatic circuit. He had been in Islamabad for talks and, according to Iran's account, left Pakistan and continued on to Oman. His message to mediators was cautious. Praising Pakistan's efforts, he asked, "We have yet to see," casting doubt on whether the United States was prepared to negotiate in earnest. Tehran's skepticism has only hardened in the wake of strikes, battlefield claims, and the public sparring between capitals. The optics have been stark. On one hand, the White House insists it remains open to diplomacy. On the other, it keeps military pressure on and on occasion emphasizes that it will not move first. The president put it simply, "We have all the cards. They have no military left practically. They have no leaders left. We don't know who the leaders are. Nobody knows who the leaders are. Very importantly, knows who the leaders are. Very importantly," he added a later line that widened the uncertainty even further. "We haven't thought about it yet," a remark that suggested the option of further escala. She remained alive even as travel plans were being scrubbed. Those mixed signals have consequences. Pakistan, long courted as a back-channel mediator between Washington and Tehran, found itself looking on as the 2 sides recalibrated. Tehran's negotiators had been prepared to sit in neutral venues to exchange proposals through intermediaries to test whether a durable ceasefire and the release of frozen assets could be bridged into broader talks. Instead, envoys prepared to travel were told to stay home, and the messages from both capitals began to echo each other in a telling way. "We are ready, but we are waiting. And we expect the other side to move first." The confusion was compounded by a leaked legal memorandum made public shortly after April 21 that outlined the legal rationale for the U.S. strikes launched on February 28. The memo, attributed to a State Department legal advisor, frames the operation as undertaken in the collective self-defense of an Israeli ally, citing Article 51 of the UN Charter. That internal document, however it was circulated and whatever its ultimate legal fate, fed a narrative Tehran and others quickly seized upon that the United States was acting not solely on its own self-defense concerns, but in tight coordination with and in support of Israeli security imperatives. President Trump flatly rejected the suggestion that Washington's hand was forced by outside partners. In a post on his platform, he wrote, "Israel never talked me into the war with Iran. The results of our October 7th added to my lifelong opinion that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon did. I watch and read the fake news pundits and polls in total disbelief. 90% of what they say are lies and made up stories, and the polls are rigged much as the 2020 presidential election was rigged. The line mixed a staunch denial of outside influence with an unmistakable appeal to domestic grievances over media and elections." At the same time, other senior U.S. officials have acknowledged intelligence ties and close coordination with allies in the run-up to the conflict. Senator Marco Rubio, speaking in public, referenced concerns that an Israeli action might have been anticipated and that the timing of U.S. action might have been anticipated and that the timing of U.S. steps was influenced by the threat picture as it emerged. "We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action," he said, arguing that preemptive U.S. steps were intended to mitigate subsequent harm to American forces. That account sits uneasily easily alongside the president's denials and has given critics on both sides of the Atlantic fresh fodder. If operations were planned in tandem, who called whom and why now matters, not only legally but politically. On the ground, Iran's account of events has been detailed and emphatic. The IRGC's report about disabled bunker-busting ordnance and neutralized submunitions is a powerful piece of narrative. It portrays an adversary that can absorb strikes and still deny those strikes their intended physical and symbolic effects. Claims that dozens of rockets and cruise missiles were shot down, destroyed or recovered and handed over for forensic analysis served two aims: to reassure a domestic audience that the attack was contained and to send a message internationally that the cost of direct military action will be paid in material as well as political terms. Whether those Iranian claims stand up to independent verification is a separate question, but as a political instrument, they have already altered the diplomatic atmosphere. They have been paired with a steady drumbeat from Tehran, accusing the United States of seeking a face-saving exit from an escalating conflict, language meant to frame American actions as opportunistic rather than principled, and to suggest that Washington may be maneuvering to preserve domestic political capital as opposed to pursuing a stable settlement. That is precisely what makes the canceled Pakistan trip so consequential. The pageantry of shuttle diplomacy can be tedious, expensive, and time-consuming. The president described it as too much traveling, a practical objection that masked a strategic calculation. He suggested rhetorically that his envoys would not waste time meeting with people that nobody ever heard of, and he emphasized cost consciousness as a reason to rely on phone calls instead. Those comments were as much about the performance of leadership as they were about logistics. Public shows of distance can be used to strengthen negotiating leverage, but they can also be read as disinterest or disengagement. For Iranian negotiators, the calculus is the opposite. The slow, incremental trust building that follows the exchange of prisoners, the release of funds, the setting of ceasefire lines, those things are fragile and require steady, predictable engagement. A single cancellation, even if couched in domestic politics, risks undoing that fragile progress. Abbas Araki's movement from Islamabad to Oman signaled a desire to keep channels open. His public skepticism signaled at the same time a rebuke of any impression that Tehran will make unilateral concessions without reciprocal and credible action from Washington. Behind the rhetoric are hard decisions. The U.S. must weigh the military advantages of continuing pressure against the risk that battlefield claims of successful denial, like the removal or defusal of GBU-57s, will embolden its adversary or prolong hostilities. Iran must weigh the domestic cost of appearing to negotiate while under sustained attack, and mediators like Pakistan and Oman must decide how much influence they can wield when the two principal parties appear so intent on preserving face. There is also a legal and normative dimension. The leaked memorandum's invocation of Article 51 underscores the way governments seek legal cover for military action. It also invites scrutiny and debate about where collective self-defense ends and unilateral action begins. For diplomatic and lawyers alike, the question is not merely who supported whom, but whether actions taken meet the standards set by international law. For politicians, the question tends to be simpler and more urgent. Will this buy us security or will it buy us trouble? The wider region watches and waits. Neighboring capitals, international organizations, and global markets all respond to the same cues. The words from leaders, the movements of missiles, the silence of planes that were meant to land for talks. As messages ricochet between Washington and Tehran, a third, quieter theater of action continues. Intelligence, logistics, and the quiet, relentless work of keeping military and diplomatic channels open. It is in that quiet where, in the coming days, the next moves are most likely to be scripted. For now, the diplomatic door is neither fully open nor entirely shut. The president's line, "They can call us anytime they want," leaves room for dialogue. The decision to cancel an in-person missio and makes that dialogue more costly in political terms. Iran's insistence that it has yet to see meaningful U.S. commitment leaves the negotiation off balance. And on the ground, claims of defused bunker busters and intercepted missiles add layers of both symbolism and practical consequence. This is a moment defined by mixed signals. Each side hopes the other will blink first, and each side sends messages designed both to reassure domestic audiences and to shape the perceptions of international partners. The bombs that did not explode became, in effect, a metaphor for the current state of play: enormous destructive potential, buried and dormant for now, but capable of altering the landscape if reactivated. What unfolds next will depend less on the music of diplomatic platitudes and more on whether the two capitals, separated by geography but connected by history and hard power, choose to trade concessions for certainty or to double down on the uncertainty that has brought them to this brink. In that choice, the role of mediators, of legal advisors, and of those small, technical acts of armaments recovery and inspection may be decisive. The world will be watching whether calls are made, phones picked up, and whether at last a sequence of steps emerges that can turn a dangerous pause into a durable ceasefire. Until then, the rubble and the rhetoric will remain side by side, telling two versions of the same story, one of conflict and one of the uncertain hope for a way out.